The morning sun spilled gently through the tall glass windows of the busy shopping arcade, catching the dust in the air and making it glitter like tiny stars. The place was alive with the usual sounds, the hum of conversation. Footsteps tapping on the polished floor, the soft squeak of strollers, the distant echo of announcements over the loudspeaker. At the center of this activity sat an old piano, its black and white keys polished from years of use but worn at the edges. Most people ignored it as they passed, too wrapped up in their own errands and routines to notice anything beyond their immediate needs. A small crowd had gathered near the piano, forming a loose semicircle. They were there mostly out of curiosity, drawn by the chatter of two men in the corner. One of them, tall and confident, was joking about music, making a point to exaggerate every word. His voice was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Anyone can hit a few keys and call it music," he said, his tone teasing and a little mocking. "I could do that myself if I had the time. Just press this key, then that key, and presto." Beethoven would be jealous. Few people laughed politely, but not everyone was amused. Some glanced at the piano, feeling a strange mix of annoyance and anticipation. In the back of the small group, a woman stood quietly, her eyes not on the man or the piano, but somewhere in between, thoughtful. She was dressed simply, her hair tied back loosely, and her posture relaxed but alert. She didn't speak, but her presence was noticeable. There was a calmness about her. It's almost like she was observing the scene as if it were a study in human behavior. The man continued, exaggerating his gestures as he mimed playing the piano in the air, making exaggerated faces as if the music were a magical spell he alone could cast. People around him smiled and laughed, caught up in the light-hearted moment. Some whispered to each other, sharing their own stories of failed piano lessons or the simple pleasure of hearing a tune. The mood was playful, harmless, and casual, but the woman didn't laugh. She didn't even smile. She shifted her weight slightly from one foot to the other, her eyes finally landing on the piano. It was almost like she had been waiting for this moment, quietly assessing the situation, measuring the atmosphere. No one really noticed her yet, because the man's voice was filling the space with its brash energy. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she took a step forward. Then another. Her movement was deliberate, steady, and calm. Some in the crowd noticed her only because she was breaking the rhythm of their own amusement. The man, too focused on his own joke, didn't immediately register her approach. He waved a hand toward her with mock dismissal, assuming she was going to play along, maybe even add to his comedic performance. She stopped just in front of the piano, placing her hands gently on the edge of the keys. Her fingers hovered for a moment, not pressing any notes yet. There was a soft intake of breath, a quiet tension that seemed to ripple through the space around her. The people nearby began to shift, sensing that something was about to happen that they couldn't quite predict. The man's laughter faltered for a moment as he watched her, a flicker of uncertainty passing across his face. He wasn't sure if she was serious or if this was part of the joke. He shrugged and returned to his performance, though his gestures were a little less certain now. The arcade had its usual background noises, the distant hum of a vacuum, the clatter of shopping carts, the occasional beep of a register, but around the piano, those sounds began to fade. People started leaning slightly forward, drawn to the presence of the woman and the potential of the moment. The man's joke had unwittingly set the stage. The air seemed to thicken with anticipation. And for a brief second, the crowd held its collective breath. Caught between amusement and curiosity, she sat down on the piano bench, adjusting her posture in a way that was natural, not overly dramatic. Her hands rested lightly on the keys, her fingers poised but relaxed. The sunlight from the windows fell across her face, highlighting the calm determination in her eyes. She didn't glance at the man, didn't react to the murmurs around her. She was focused entirely on the piano, as if the rest of the world had melted away. The man, sensing that his joke had reached its natural end, opened his mouth to say something else. But the words caught in his throat as she pressed a single key. The note rang out clearly, pure and steady. It was simple, but it had weight. Something shifted in the crowd. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Whispers died down. and eyes turned toward the piano with full attention. She pressed another key, then another, not in random sequence, but deliberately, each note flowing into the next. There was a rhythm to her playing that felt natural, unforced, as if she were speaking through the instrument rather than performing for anyone. The sound started soft, almost tentative, but it carried an undeniable presence. The crowd leaned in, mesmerized, as the joke that had begun moments earlier now seemed trivial in comparison. The man's face changed slowly. His confidence, once so evident, began to waver. He had expected laughter, a bit of fun, maybe a few impressed nods. He had not expected this. Each note she played seemed to carry intention, thought, and emotion. It wasn't flashy, but it was authentic. It wasn't about impressing anyone, yet it captured everyone. He glanced around, noticing the silent faces of those who had gathered. Some had their mouths slightly open in surprise, others had tears welling in their eyes. He realized with a mix of astonishment and discomfort that the moment he had set up as a joke was becoming something else entirely. The woman continued, her hands moving effortlessly across the keys. There was a natural flow to her playing, a connection between her mind, her heart, and the instrument. The notes were simple, but the feeling behind them was profound. It was as if she were telling a story, one that could be understood without words. The crowd, once casual onlookers, became witnesses to something deeply human, a spontaneous expression that transcended the moment of humor that had begun it all. Some people shifted closer, their curiosity turning into quiet admiration. Parents held their children a little tighter. Older men and women leaned slightly forward as if trying to catch every nuance. The energy around the piano was different, now intimate, powerful, and unexpectedly moving. The man who had joked felt a strange mix of embarrassment and awe. He had thought he was at the center of attention, the one directing the laughter, but now he realized he was merely an observer. The woman, through a simple act, had captured something far greater than humor. As the notes continued, subtle changes in tempo and tone began to emerge. The music was no longer just a response to the joke. It was becoming its own entity. Each chord, each delicate pause, seemed to draw the listeners deeper into the experience. There was no rush. It's no attempt to impress, just an honest and heartfelt performance that demanded attention in the quietest, most powerful way. The crowd held its collective breath, fully engaged, as if waiting for a story to unfold with every key she touched. In that moment, the woman wasn't just playing a piano. She was creating a space where people could pause, listen, and feel something they might not have expected to feel in a busy shopping arcade. The ordinary had become extraordinary, all from a simple act of walking toward an instrument and responding in her own way. The joke that had begun the moment felt distant, almost irrelevant. What mattered now was the music, the presence of the woman, and the shared experience of the crowd that had gathered, caught between surprise, admiration, and quiet reflection. And so the morning continued. But everything had shifted slightly. People who had been passing by casually found themselves rooted to the spot. The arcade, noisy and bustling just moments ago, now held a sense of quiet reverence. The woman at the piano played on, unaware of the impact she was having, unaware that a simple moment born from a joke was about to leave a lasting impression on everyone around her. The sound of the piano filled the air more fully now, weaving through the voices, footsteps, and distant announcements of the busy arcade. People who had been casually walking past were now stopping in their tracks, drawn by the music that seemed to carry a life of its own. Each note she played was clear and deliberate, soft, yet powerful enough to command attention. There was a rhythm to her playing, a flow that made the music feel like a conversation, an unfolding story without words. The man who had made the joke moments before shifted uncomfortably. He had intended to draw attention to himself, to entertain with humor, but he now found himself a silent witness to something far beyond his expectations. Each note she played seemed to speak directly to him, challenging the ease with which he had tried to entertain. He glanced around and noticed the faces of others, their expressions a mixture of surprise, admiration, and quiet wonder. The laughter and casual chatter had disappeared, replaced by attentive silence. The woman's fingers moved gracefully across the keys, and with each chord, She seemed to pull the crowd closer into her world. The music was gentle at times, like a soft breeze, and at other moments it swelled with emotion, filling the space with warmth and tension. It was a strange contrast, the bustling activity of the arcade around them and the quiet intensity centered on her piano. People could feel the difference. It was as though time itself had slowed, allowing them to experience something precious and rare. Some of the children in the crowd pressed closer to their parents, sensing the importance of the moment even if they could not understand it fully. Elderly onlookers leaned slightly forward, their eyes focused on the keys as if they were reading a story written in sound. Even the man who had joked earlier felt a deep shift inside him. His confidence, which had been so brash and light-hearted moments ago, was replaced by a quiet humility. He realized that his attempt at humor had inadvertently set the stage for a moment of beauty that could not have been planned or predicted. The woman continued, her movements over the piano keys seamless and natural. Each note was measured, precise, yet flowing effortlessly into the next. There was no hurry, no attempt to impress anyone. She played as though she were speaking to herself, and yet everyone in the arcade could hear and feel the emotion in every touch of the keys. The music had a way of making the ordinary seem extraordinary. Shoppers who had initially walked past, absorbed in their own routines, found themselves pausing, listening, feeling a connection to something larger than the hustle and bustle of their day. A few people in the crowd began whispering to each other. "She's amazing," one said softly. "I didn't expect anything like this," another murmured. There were no phones raised, no attempts to record the moment, because the music itself held everyone's attention more completely than any video could. The authenticity of her performance created a shared experience, an invisible bond between all who were present. It was a reminder that sometimes the most profound moments come unannounced, without planning, simply emerging from someone's quiet choice to act. The piano seemed to respond to her touch, each key yielding to her intent and feeling. The melody shifted subtly, introducing variations that kept the listeners engaged without overwhelming them. It was as if the woman had become an interpreter of emotion, translating unspoken thoughts and feelings into sound. People felt memories stir within them, images of their pasts or imagined futures, evoked by the rise and fall of the notes. Some closed their eyes, allowing themselves to be fully absorbed. Others watched in silence, marveling at the delicate control she displayed, the gentle strength behind each movement. The man who had joked now stood still, his earlier bravado replaced with reflection. He studied the woman's hands, the way they hovered briefly over the keys before pressing down with precision and grace. He noticed the slight tilt of her head, the focused expression in her eyes, and the subtle way her body swayed with the music. There was no pretense in her performance, no attempt to command attention forcefully. She simply allowed the music to emerge naturally, and it did, effortlessly, captivating all who were present. As the melody continued, new layers of sound began to appear. She introduced gentle chords that resonated deeply, creating a warmth that seemed to wrap around the listeners. The rhythm became more complex, flowing like a conversation that had many voices yet remained harmonious. Every person present felt drawn into the ebb and flow of the music, sensing the care and intention behind each note. It was an experience that went beyond entertainment. It was emotional, deeply human, and profoundly moving. People who had initially been skeptical or indifferent now felt a quiet awe. They exchanged glances, nodding slightly at each other, acknowledging silently that something extraordinary was unfolding. The children remained close to their parents, some tapping their fingers softly in time with the music, while older members of the crowd leaned on their canes or hands, their attention fully absorbed. No one spoke, because no words seemed adequate to describe the sensation of hearing the piano played with such heartfelt sincerity. The woman's playing shifted again, introducing softer tones and slower rhythms that invited reflection. It was as though she were creating a space where every listener could feel and think freely, a space removed from the noise of the arcade and the world outside. Some people felt memories rise unexpectedly, memories of their childhood, of loved ones, of long-forgotten moments of joy or sadness. Others simply felt a sense of peace, a temporary escape from the rush of daily life. The music held a quiet power, one that invited introspection and connection simultaneously. The man who had begun with a joke now understood the transformation that had taken place. He felt a mixture of humility and gratitude, recognizing that he had witnessed something that could not have been manufactured or predicted. His earlier role as the center of attention seemed trivial now, replaced by a profound appreciation for the woman's gift and courage. He saw that true impact was not measured by jokes or performances aimed at amusement, but by the authenticity of one's actions and the emotion they could evoke in others. The crowd remained captivated, each person experiencing the music in their own way. Some felt moved to tears, others to quiet smiles. The effect of the performance was subtle but undeniable, creating a shared experience that transcended words. The woman continued to play, unaware of the full depth of her impact. Focused entirely on the piano and the music that flowed from it, she was fully present in the moment. And that presence was what made the performance unforgettable. Even as she played, the world around them continued, but in a muted and distant way. Shoppers walked by, some pausing briefly, others stopping entirely to listen. The usual background noise of the arcade, the beeping of registers, squeak of carts, the distant chatter faded into insignificance. The piano and the woman at its keys had become the focal point, creating a temporary sanctuary of sound and feeling within the ordinary environment. As she reached a delicate part of the melody, a pause lingered for a moment, drawing attention to the space between notes as much as to the notes themselves. This brief silence held weight, quiet acknowledgement that the music was not merely sound, but a vessel for expression, capable of conveying emotions beyond the reach of language. The crowd held its collective breath, absorbed completely, sensing that they were experiencing something rare and precious. In that moment, the arcade no longer felt like a place of errands and commerce. It was a place of shared humanity, of emotions expressed without words, of connection forged through sound. The man who had made the joke realized that he had witnessed the beginning of something extraordinary. What had started as a casual, light-hearted moment had grown into a profound experience, one that would linger in the memories of everyone present long after the final note faded. And so, the music continued, flowing seamlessly, carrying with it the emotions, thoughts, and stories that each listener brought with them. Every key pressed was an invitation to engage, reflect, and feel. And in this shared experience, the ordinary had been transformed into the unforgettable all through the simple, unassuming act of a woman responding to a moment, a piano, and the unspoken potential for beauty hidden in the everyday world. The music from the piano had begun to change the energy of the entire arcade. People who had entered with a purpose, focused on shopping or errands, now found themselves still, entranced by the melody that seemed to fill not just the space, but something deeper inside them. The woman at the piano continued to play with grace and intention, each note carefully measured, yet flowing naturally. Her hands moved with a rhythm that seemed almost alive, as if the piano were an extension of her thoughts and feelings. The man who had joked earlier stood a few feet away, his usual confident posture replaced with a mixture of awe and introspection. He had expected laughter, easy attention, and casual amusement. Instead, he was witnessing something extraordinary unfold in real time. Every note seemed to speak directly to him, challenging his assumptions and gently reminding him of the power of sincerity. He watched quietly, captivated. Realizing that he had underestimated both the woman and the music, the crowd around the piano had grown slightly. But there was no noise, no chatter. Everyone had been drawn into the sound, hanging on to each note as if it were part of a shared secret. There were people of all ages, from young children perched on their parents' shoulders to older individuals leaning carefully on canes. Each person seemed to feel the music differently, some with a quiet joy, others with a sudden swell of emotion, yet all connected through the invisible thread of the melody. The piano sound evolved subtly as she played. She introduced gentle variations in tempo, allowing the music to breathe and expand. Her fingers moved over the keys with a delicate precision, pausing briefly at moments of emphasis before flowing again into the melody. The room itself seemed to respond, as if the music had its own presence, reaching into the hearts of the listeners. Some people closed their eyes, allowing the notes to wash over them, while others watched her hands, fascinated by the skill and emotion displayed. There was a quiet intensity in the way she played. It was not a performance for applause or recognition. It was something deeper, almost sacred in its simplicity. Every note carried emotion, and every pause allowed reflection. The audience could feel that they were part of something rare, an unplanned moment of genuine human expression that transcended words. The woman was not merely playing the piano. She was telling a story, one that required no explanation because it was understood through feeling. The man who had mocked her began to shift slightly. His laughter, his brash confidence, and his need for attention had been stripped away, replaced by humility and a sense of awe. He realized that he was witnessing a kind of courage he had not expected, the courage to be authentic in a public space, the courage to express oneself honestly without pretense. The simple act of approaching the piano and allowing the music to flow had created a moment that touched everyone present, including him. Around them, subtle gestures revealed the impact of the music. A mother gently held her child's hand a little tighter, feeling the warmth of connection through the melody. Elderly listeners nodded slightly, their eyes misting over as memories surfaced. A teenager, who had been scrolling through a phone moments before, put it down completely, captivated by the sound and the emotion it carried. Even the casual shoppers, initially distracted by their own errands, stopped and listened, understanding intuitively that something extraordinary was happening. The melody grew richer, more layered, yet it never felt overwhelming. The music seemed to balance complexity and simplicity perfectly, each note placed intentionally yet effortlessly. The woman's focus was entirely on the piano and the flow of sound, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm, her fingers pressing keys with thoughtful care. She did not glance at the crowd or seek approval. Her attention was fully on the expression of the music itself, and this authenticity made the moment even more profound. The man who had joked finally approached slowly, feeling an unfamiliar mixture of admiration and vulnerability. He realized that his previous words, meant to entertain, had been unnecessary and even trivial in the face of the beauty unfolding. He observed her closely, noting the subtle expressions on her face, the gentle movements of her hands, the quiet determination in her posture. Every aspect of her presence seemed to contribute to the emotion and power of the music. People in the crowd were now completely absorbed. Conversations had ceased entirely, replaced by the shared experience of listening and feeling. The music seemed to create a temporary sanctuary, a space where the usual noise and distractions of life could be set aside. Each listener found something personal in the melodia, memory, and emotion. A thought, but all felt connected to the larger moment through the collective attention and presence of those around them. The woman's playing introduced subtle shifts, soft chords that invited reflection, and slower passages that emphasized the beauty of silence between notes. The dynamics of her performance drew the audience into an almost meditative state, where every key, every pause felt significant. There was a sense of shared understanding, an unspoken recognition that they were experiencing something unique and fleeting, something that could not be captured fully by words or recordings. The man who had initially mocked her began to understand the true power of humility and expression. He saw that the moment was not about proving skill or gaining attention. It was about allowing something genuine to emerge, something that could touch hearts without effort or pretension. His initial laughter and confidence had been replaced by quiet contemplation and respect, both for the woman and for the music itself. Around the piano, small details of human response added to the depth of the moment. Children leaned slightly closer, fascinated by the sound, while parents watched with gentle smiles. Older listeners had a subtle shine in their eyes, feeling emotions stirred by the melody. Even strangers exchanged glances, recognizing silently that they were sharing an intimate experience together. The music had created a bond among them, a connection that transcended age, background, and circumstance. The woman continued to play, unaware of the profound effect she was having. Her focus was entirely on the flow of the music, her emotions channeled into each key, each pause, each chord. She was not performing for anyone. She was simply expressing herself through the instrument, and in doing so had created a moment that was larger than herself, larger than any individual in the crowd as the melody continued. It reached a crescendo, building slowly with intensity and emotion. The crowd remained entranced, caught between anticipation and reverence, fully present in the unfolding experience. Every person there felt the weight and significance of the moment, understanding intuitively that they were witnessing something rare, true expression of human emotion, creativity, and connection. Then, as gently as it had built, the music softened again, returning to delicate, thoughtful passages that allowed the listeners to breathe and reflect. The tension and intensity gave way to peace and stillness, a quiet resolution that seemed to echo the sentiments of every individual present. The moment was not rushed. It was experienced fully, with attention and appreciation from everyone in the space. The man who had joked finally found his voice, speaking softly to himself rather than to anyone else. He acknowledged, silently, the lesson that had unfolded before him, that true impact comes not from humor or performance meant to impress, but from authenticity, courage, and the willingness to express oneself sincerely. He watched the woman continue, humbled and thoughtful, realizing that the moment had forever changed his perception of both music and human connection. Around the arcade, the world seemed transformed. What had been ordinary a busy shopping center? A routine morning had become extraordinary through the simple, unassuming act of a woman playing a piano. Every note, every pause, every subtle shift in the melody had contributed to a shared experience that would linger in the hearts of all who witnessed it. The music had created something beyond itself, a memory, a connection, a reminder of the beauty that could emerge in unexpected moments. All from something as simple as responding to a joke with honesty and expression. The final notes of the piano hung in the air, delicate and lingering, like a whisper that refused to be forgotten. The woman's hands slowly lifted from the keys, and a soft, almost reverent silence filled the space. The arcade, which had been alive with its usual noise, now seemed suspended in time. Shoppers, workers, parents, children, and the man who had started the joke all remained still, as if collectively acknowledging that they had witnessed something extraordinary. The woman did not rise immediately. She allowed the silence to exist, letting the final chords resonate in the minds and hearts of everyone around. She had not sought applause, recognition, or attention, yet the impact of her performance was profound. People in the crowd felt it deeply, a mix of admiration, awe, and a quiet understanding of the power of sincerity. They had all been part of something rare, something that could not be captured by a recording or described fully with words. The man who had made the joke earlier stepped forward cautiously. His earlier brashness was gone, replaced by humility and reflection. He approached her slowly, careful not to disturb the moment, and said softly, almost to himself, "I didn't expect this." He had no need to finish the sentence because his tone, his expression, and the shared understanding between them conveyed everything. The woman looked up briefly, meeting his eyes, and offered a gentle nod. There was no need for words. The respect and acknowledgement passed silently, more powerful than any conversation. Around them, the crowd began to respond naturally. Some clapped softly, almost tentatively, unsure if they should break the spell of the moment. Others whispered to each other, expressing their feelings in hushed tones that was beautiful. I didn't know music could feel like that. I've never felt anything like this before. The children looked up at their parents, sharing small smiles, as if they had understood something magical, even if they couldn't articulate it. The older listeners' eyes glistened, touched by memories and emotions that the music had stirred. The woman finally stood, her movements calm and deliberate. She did not seek acknowledgement, yet people instinctively stepped back to give her space. She had created a moment that belonged not to her alone, but to everyone present, shared experience that was both intimate and universal. She gathered her belongings quietly and walked toward the edge of the gathering crowd, her presence serene and unassuming. The man followed, still processing what had occurred. He felt a mixture of humility and inspiration. The joke that had started it all seemed trivial now, almost meaningless. Compared to the profound connection created by her simple act, he realized that humor, when combined with thoughtlessness, could never create what honesty and genuine expression could achieve. She had transformed an ordinary day and an ordinary space into a moment that people would remember for a long time. People began to disperse slowly, carrying the impact of the performance with them. Some returned to their shopping, but they did so more quietly, as if reluctant to leave the emotional resonance of the music behind. Others lingered, still absorbed, discussing in low voices how remarkable the moment had been. Even the employees working nearby paused briefly, catching fragments of the melody and feeling the effect of something beyond their routine tasks. As the woman moved through the crowd, she noticed small gestures of gratitude, a nod, a smile, a whispered word of thanks. She accepted them quietly, not seeking praise, but acknowledging the shared humanity that had been present in the moment. She had not performed for an audience, yet she had given them something far more lastinga, a reminder of the beauty, emotion, and connection that could exist in ordinary places when someone chose to act with authenticity. The man who had made the joke remained where he was for a while longer, reflecting. He realized he had learned an unexpected lesson that day. Humility, patience, and genuine effort mattered more than cleverness or bravado. The music had shown him that even a casual, seemingly insignificant moment could be transformed into something unforgettable when approached with honesty and care. It was a lesson he would carry with him. Long after leaving the arcade, people began leaving in small groups or individually, still talking quietly among themselves. Their voices were different now, not the hurried chatter of daily life, but a thoughtful, reflective tone, as if the music had awakened something deeper within them. The woman had created more than just sound. She had created a space for reflection, connection, and appreciation, leaving an imprint on the hearts of all who had witnessed it. Some lingered near the piano, gently touching the keys, remembering the melodies that had filled the space. Others simply walked away, carrying the memory in silence. The arcade itself felt different, as if it had been subtly transformed by the energy of the moment. What had been a routine morning of shopping and errands had become a shared experience, a rare moment of beauty, reflection, and human connection. The woman finally exited the arcade. Moving into the light of the morning outside, she walked calmly, her presence quiet but profound. The crowd remained for a few minutes longer, holding on to the resonance of the music, reluctant to let it go completely. Even after leaving, people would remember the experience, recalling the melody, the emotion, and the authenticity of the woman who had created it. The man who had joked now felt a mix of gratitude and inspiration. He understood that the lesson he had witnessed was not only about music, but about life, humility, and the unexpected impact of genuine expression. He would remember this day, not for the joke he had made, but for the lesson he had learned and the human connection that had unfolded from a simple moment. As the crowd dispersed completely and the arcade returned to its usual rhythm, the piano remained silent now, yet still carrying the echoes of the performance. It had been a witness to an unforgettable moment, one that had transformed the ordinary into something extraordinary. The simple joke that had started it all became insignificant, overshadowed by the depth of emotion, connection, and beauty that had emerged in its place. People left with hearts a little lighter, minds a little fuller, and spirits quietly touched. The memory of the woman's music lingered, reminding everyone present that life could offer moments of wonder in unexpected places. That day, in a busy shopping arcade, a simple piano and a quiet, unassuming woman had created a shared experience that would remain with them forever. Reminder that authenticity, courage, and expression could transform even the most ordinary circumstances into something unforgettable. Though the initial performance had ended, the memory of the music continued to ripple through the people who had been present. In the days that followed, stories about the moment spread quietly, shared between friends, family members, and coworkers. People recounted the experience in the same way they might describe a sunrise or a rare event in nature. something unexpected that reminded them of beauty and connection in the simplest forms of life. The piano, now silent again in the arcade, had become more than an instrument. It had become a symbol of the extraordinary. Hidden within ordinary spaces, the man who had joked earlier found himself returning to that day repeatedly in his thoughts. He remembered the way the woman had approached the piano without hesitation, how her fingers had moved with purpose yet ease, and how the music had grown organically, touching everyone around her. He realized that the impact of authenticity could be more powerful than any prepared performance, and that a single act of courage and sincerity could change the way people experience the world, if only for a moment. That lesson stayed with him, influencing the way he spoke, acted, and approached others. In the arcade itself, people began to notice a subtle difference. Regular visitors commented on the atmosphere, sensing a calmness, a quiet awareness that wasn't there before. The piano, once overlooked, became a point of curiosity and anticipation. Sometimes individuals would stop and press a key expecting a note. They would remember the music that had once filled the space and the woman who had created it. It was no longer just an object. It was a reminder that ordinary things could hold extraordinary possibilities. The woman herself went on quietly with her life. She did not seek recognition or accolades. She did not perform in public again immediately, yet the memory of that day remained strong. In her mind, it was a moment of sharing, a way to express something unspoken through sound. She understood, even if others did not, that her action had created a ripple, one that traveled through the hearts and minds of everyone present. Each listener had been affected differently, and she found a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the music had left a lasting impression. People who had witnessed the performance continued to share their experience in small ways. At work, conversations might start with, "Do you remember the woman at the piano?" In cafes, friends would smile as they recalled the melody and the shared silence that had followed it. Even strangers passing each other on the street would sometimes nod knowingly, recognizing the subtle connection created by a shared experience. The music had transcended the moment itself, becoming a thread that tied people together, reminding them that beauty and humanity could exist anywhere. The arcade managers noticed something too. They realized that visitors seemed to pause longer near the piano, and that people spoke of the place differently. It was no longer just a shopping area. It had become a small haven of possibility, a place where one might unexpectedly witness something remarkable. The piano was carefully maintained, polished, and left ready, as if acknowledging its potential to host another unforgettable moment. Even without a performance, it carried the memory of the music like a gentle, unspoken promise. Among those who had been present, some began to approach life differently. Inspired by the example of the woman, they took small steps to express themselves more genuinely. A young man began playing the guitar he had neglected for years. A mother taught her child a simple tune at the kitchen piano. An older woman began sketching again, something she had abandoned long ago. Each act, though small, carried a trace of that moment in the arcade, reminding them that creativity, courage, and sincerity could ripple outward, reaching further than they ever imagined. Even the man who had joked found himself subtly changing. His humor became gentler, less about drawing attention, more about connecting with others. He thought about the woman often, her calm focus, and her ability to touch people without seeking recognition. He realized that true influence came from actions that arose from authenticity, from doing something without expectation yet with purpose. The music had taught him that words alone were fleeting, but genuine acts could leave lasting impressions. As the weeks passed, occasional visitors would return to the arcade simply to see the piano again. Some would press a key just to hear the sound and pause to imagine the melody that had once filled the room. Others would sit nearby, quietly observing, hoping to sense the echoes of the extraordinary moment. The space had been subtly transformed by the shared experience, and the memory of that day continued to inspire reflection and connection. It reminded people that extraordinary events could emerge from ordinary circumstances, and that attention, presence, and courage could turn simple moments into memories that endure. In small communities, the story spread in whispers. People recounted it in their own ways, emphasizing different aspects: the calm determination of the woman, the unexpected power of music, or the humility of the man who had joked. Each retelling added new layers, yet the essence remained the same, a reminder that human connection, expressed sincerely, had the power to leave a lasting mark. Some listeners, inspired by the story, sought out pianos or instruments of their own, hoping to create moments of beauty in their own lives. They may not have replicated that exact experience, but the lesson lived on: that courage, authenticity, and the willingness to share oneself could create memories that endure far beyond the moment itself. The woman's life continued quietly. She played music in private, in small gatherings, and sometimes in other public spaces, but always without expectation. She understood the subtle power of her actions. How one simple decision to approach the piano, to allow the music to flow, had transformed the day for many people. She carried the memory of the reaction, the silence, the shared humanity, and the quiet understanding that had emerged spontaneously. Her actions had become a ripple, unseen but felt, spreading gently through the lives of those who had witnessed them.